with Hubert. He is program director for Simpson Esports, a member of the competition counselor for Ace Esports and for Midwest Esports. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. For people who don't know who you are, I guess go ahead and tell us a little bit more about yourself.
For sure. So I'm Hubert Whan Tong. I'm the program director for esports at Simpson College, previously at Illinois College, as well as DeSales University as the assistant director over there. Played all throughout college, played a little bit of amateur for League of Legends, and have just been in love with collegiate esports ever since.
That's awesome. That's so cool. So, what would you say got you into esports?
A lot of it is due to like college experience.
Yeah.
I had a great mentor, Karen Ruggles, over at DeSales University. She's absolutely amazing, and really showed me what not only again like I had played traditional athletics all throughout my childhood, but
Mhm.
there was never like a big like, advocacy or like player advocacy or even student advocacy in those spaces. And she did a great job showing me how to be a mentor, how to be engaged with your students, and obviously both with their academic progression, but also with their development as a player. And I
Mhm.
got to work with some really great amateur coaches under my time there. And it just ended up being something that really I would talk to people. And the best advice I ever got was like, you have a lot of options as to what you could do with your life, but like what excites you to get up in the morning. And
Yeah.
esports was it for me. And the industry was still small enough where a lot of people took a lot of chances on me at the time and hasn't slowed down since.
That's awesome. That is so cool. So, you've had a long journey from sports to esports. What are some of the biggest similarities or even the difference compared to both?
So, at least in my time in traditional athletics, I dealt with a lot of like personal injuries. So, like I played rugby, football, a
Oh,
lot of like
wow.
contact sports, being 6'2" and 250 linemen, whatever. Obviously, there's just a similarity in the bond of camaraderie. I can't speak highly enough of like, the teams that I've been on that I've had the pleasure of not only having great teammates, but people that I consider really good, close personal friends. And I like seeing that in the programs that I manage and the programs that I work with. I know that there are plenty of students that have come through our program that might not have known about each other, might not have liked each other to start with, but in cooperating and having to even just inhabit the same physical space, just learn more about each other, resolve some of those preconceptions, and it's been really nice. And I think that that's something that esports does similarly well to traditional athletics as well.
Oh, absolutely. I remember talking to one guy and they do like physical therapy for the esports, hands and like just warm ups just to make sure that the body is ready for the game. And it's kind of weird how not really weird, but it's amazing to really see that esports is almost there into like, the eyes of like, sports in general. And all of us are taking it to where we have to prepare like sports players, which is very cool. It's really different.
Even just a couple years ago, I think esports actually beat traditional sports in this aspect, where like sports psychology was utilized by like some teams in traditional athletics, but they really were a mainstay in esports, and were considered like, integral parts of like teams, whether it's like esports managers, GMs, what have you. Like teams that consistently performed well had sports psychologists on their roster, and
Mhm.
that became more adopted in traditional athletics. I don't know if I would say in a one-to-one because of esports, but like,
Right.
obviously we're taking pages out of each other's books, so it's great.
Yeah, it is really good. Now going towards that, as a member for the competition council, what actually is that? That is something that I haven't heard, and I want to know more. Like, what is that?
For sure. So for NACE and for MEC, they're slightly different in terms of NACE's member-run body conference.
Mhm.
So for NACE, you're voted in. For MEC, it's mostly nominated. But all of it basically deals with the structure of competition, and that's the broadest overview I can give it. So in terms of like when map pools change, or there are game patches, or Call of Duty is a really good example where like the actual title releases in the middle of a competitive season, typically.
Mhm.
How we onboard or offboard that title or how that competition looks, all falls under that purview. If there's ever like discussion about like, best of three versus best of seven versus this, that, or the other thing, what is like player eligibility, in terms of like, how graduate students, like, are they going to compete campus, off campus? If their housing's not provided, how do we deal with that? Um, Do we want a year-round schedule? Do we want to allow remote play? All of these fun
Right.
topics that set collegiate esports Twitter ablaze is all stuff that our competition councils typically deal with.
That's really cool. How did you end up getting the opportunity to be part of the competition council?
For NACE specifically,
Mhm.
I think I'm getting this right, but one of my other mentors, Chase Newcomb, I think he was at Ambrose at the time. Me and him just had developed a relationship, being both based in Iowa at the time. And in talking with him, I think he just threw me a nom, and I didn't really think anything of it at the time, if I'm being completely honest. But somehow secured the votes. I don't really like to campaign, so but I got extremely fortunate that my peers trusted me in the role, and I'd like to think I've done a good job helping represent some smaller institutions that might not always be the most competitively minded, but might be more student forward or student
Right.
development focused.
That's awesome. And so now that we got the past, what about the future? What do you think the future of being part of the competition council, and what more do you think is gonna come out of it for esports?
I think that collegiate esports is in an interesting spot right now, especially regarding competition. So, when we talk about a lot of conversations in the space, it's how do we serve the greatest amount of people, and how do we make everyone happy? And delivering that product is never easy. If everyone likes something 100%, it probably isn't the best product, right? Um,
Right.
and so I think right now, in all the conversations I have, it's always figuring out when we're looking at a decision, who is it serving? What is our goal with the decision or even the problem that we're talking about? So if it's
Hmm.
to address this particular instance, how do we do that? And does that decision then have trickle down effects to maybe some unintended consequences? Um,
Right.
and I think that again, you drop a pebble in a water, you're going to feel the ripples eventually. But I think that there are a lot of interesting things, whether that's remote play, whether that's year-long seasons, whether that's self-select, whether that's a bunch of different topics that a lot of different organizations are dealing with.
Hmm.
But what do those changes do? What population do they serve? What might be some unintended consequences? And I think all of that is always up for discussion currently.
Right. Do you think that this would probably set apart from professional esports, or do you think that they're probably on the same wavelength compared to collegiates?
Extremely different.
Really?
At least in terms of like orgs, I think they deal with things very similarly to collegiate. So like if we look at a brand like 100 Thieves, right? Um, the biggest thing is that they're fielding multiple titled teams to very different demographics.
Hmm.
Um, the difference is essentially if we look at maybe something like LCS, for example, or even just the Riot ecosystem.
Right.
Riot is only really managing League of Legends and Valorant, and those are two separate teams typically,
Mm.
in terms of like commissioners and governance there. A lot of collegiate is governing multiple titles under the same under multiple 100 thieves sort of organizations being colleges,
Okay.
and it gets a little bit messier in that way because we don't only have to worry about how do I deliver the best League of Legends experience possible. It's how do I deliver the best Call of Duty, Rocket League, Valorant, XYZ experience across multiple titles for all people that want to utilize this conference. And so when Riot makes a decision, they can be a little bit more narrow-minded to say, "Oh, this is going to be the best for North American League of Legends." When we're talking at like collegiate conferences, it's much more about how do we make the best overall product that services everyone, and we need knowledge experts on each individual title. It gets a little bit muddy that way.
It does sound like it. Now, you've been involved with a few competitions and events. How has that been for you? Is that like different change in like ways compared to the competition for NACE, or how?
The idea of LAN, I'm
Yeah.
assuming. So we obviously help structure a lot of like, the ideas of like, well, again, under competition council, we might talk about like, is it going to be a top 8 LAN? Is it going to be
Mm.
double elim? Is it going to be bracket reset? All of those things that we obviously talk about. But in terms of like, the event management side, we really do rely really heavily on our partners in things like board of directors as well as whoever we end up partnering with for event management. But on a more like personal note, in terms of like we host multiple events out of our space, hosting lands here at Simpson College. Um, and so, in terms of the actual event management part, it's a entirely different skill set than
Yeah,
a lot of the competition kind of best practices, I guess,
yeah.
that are like, normally focused on when we talk about CC. But yeah, and both are a blast. I do want to say that both figuring out the form of competition, but also doing event management is incredibly rewarding. But definitely all day, all weekend, a lot more runway, getting everything into place for that.
Right. As it has been rewarding, like what would you say is the most like memorable or unforgettable moment for you in this experience?
There were a couple lands that we traveled to. One in particular, we were playing Columbia College, and they are, or at the time, and I think they still are, a pretty well-renowned Valorant team. And we were playing in a best of one tournament against them, and I think we went up something like 9-4, 9-3, and I think we had to like pull across three more rounds. We didn't end up beating them, but it was an incredibly tense moment. Uh, I think one of their players got a little too excited, and so he hopped off in a land setting, and one of my players just goes, "Who are you, man?" It was definitely not the most good spirited, but it definitely was memorable for
Yeah.
sure.
You started seeing like God Gamer and you're like, "Wait, why is he doing this?"
Exactly, it was funny. We still talk about it in the program to this day. There are students that didn't even attend that land that they'll be like, "Who are you?" Just randomly when they pop off. So it's been a nice little piece of program tradition, I guess.
For
Now.
sure. Now with being in lands and Simpsons Esports and no matter just like everything in general, if you could have a competition that is uncontroversial, what competition, what game would it be? Who are you competing with?
So I don't know. Are a bunch of friends in industry that I'd love to have at a LAN. Eric Goebel over at Landmark College obviously is top of mind. Some of my old mentors like Chase and Ruggles, having them come to a LAN would be phenomenal. I work with a lot of talented people, and so I don't want to forget anyone by naming a bunch. But
Right.
in terms of title, I will say this is it's somewhat of an opportune question. Recently, we've been exploring some like title editions
Okay.
because there's Deadlock's been the talk of the town recently, and we've just off that seen some more titles that are catching our eye internally in our program.
Mhm.
And so me and our assistant director have been going through Steam, kind of seeing what's up. And recently, Supervive has
Okay.
been a big hit within the program, both players and our staff.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't know if any of the viewers or yourself know about it, but it's by a bunch of ex Riot devs, and it's like a battle or like a battle arena with like MOBA elements, and it's a
Okay.
very interesting genre bend. I think it's demoing this weekend, but it's been an absolute blast over the last week seeing like players and our staff kind
That's
of go
awesome.
off on it.
That is so cool. Oh man. Let's see. Oh, you were also a board of directors member for the MVEC Esports. What is that? How did you
Yes.
get into that?
So MVEC is a Midwest Valley Esports conference. We started it last year. Myself and a bunch of other directors in our traditional athletics conference.
That's
So
awesome.
because the NCAA doesn't really support it in its totality, I know that
Mhm.
some NCAA conferences have picked it up, but ours currently doesn't. There just aren't enough schools, or there's not enough pressure there to really have it adopted. And so a bunch of us got together and we're talking about, wouldn't it be nice if we played each other and we could continue some of these traditional athletics rivalries that we see in soccer, football, whatever
For
other
sure.
things are on campus. So last year we launched it. This year we originally it was a launch of four schools, very very small double round robin competition. Um, but this year we were able to double that. We now have an 8-team conference
That's
with a
awesome.
couple honorary members from our non-traditional athletics conference, but there's out of conference play as well for traditional athletics, and there are a lot of schools that we were very happy to welcome in. So it's
In
been
the collegiate space or like
yep,
the classic?
all in the
Awesome.
collegiate space. So
That's
we
really
were able to
cool.
double our membership, and it's been really nice. And so as board of director for that, a lot of it is just figuring out how we're going to fund. So like
Mhm.
obviously we throw the LAN ourselves, and we have plenty of low cost ways to facilitate that sort of thing. But if we want extravagant trophies or we want
Right.
catering or whatever, just having ways to monetize that, I think is been the biggest thing that I've done in conjunction as for the board of directors for that conference.
That's very cool. Do you, by any chance, since this is part of like collegiate, we're trying to keep the next generation from growing or keep them to grow. Do you go to high school events and talk about the collegiate space, or is
As
that
much
something
as
in
I
the
can.
works? Yeah.
So I'm actually originally from the East Coast,
Mhm.
Delaware, Wilmington area represent, but
Ooh.
I go home a lot. Esports seems to be growing really concentrated in the Midwest. I normally chalk it up to like no coastal draw where like you have LA in the West, you have New York in the East,
Hmm.
and so esports has really been like its teeth into the Midwest, Michigan specifically. And so going back home, I always try to link up with some colleges out there again in the Delaware PA area. There aren't a whole lot of them, and
Yeah.
so linking up with other colleges, linking up with other high schools, linking up with high school directors, because a lot of the time those directors are not I'm paid staff members. They are either volunteers or they're science teacher who just really wants to see kids engage with something that they care about.
Yes.
And it's somewhat of a thankless role, and so I always try to link up with as many high schools that I can, any colleges that I can, anything that I can help to do to like space, I'm always happy to do.
That's awesome. That's really cool. So you do feel like I'm are pretty much trying to build a strong community, at least for sure in the Midwest, or wherever you are with the MVEC esports. What advice would you give to others to like the same, like you're trying to provide?
At least for us, again, like in collegiate, it's a great environment. I really do love it. It's a cooperative space, and that's one of the things that I think it's underplayed a lot. I think
Mhm.
that like from traditional athletics, you see like have rivalries, and you have gotten to the point where it's hiding your playbook, you have your secret technology or your secret regiment, or like always trying to get the edge, and that's not to say that esports isn't also competitive, but
Right.
the amount of directors that I've talked to, the amount of people that I work with, everyone is always willing to lend a hand. So like, feel free to reach out. I don't think that there are a lot of directors that I know that people regard really highly that would be willing to talk to people. And I
Yeah.
love that about the space. The other main thing is that if you're looking to get in the space, know that it's a lot of hours, know that it's kind of thankless, like building an industry from the ground up. But the most rewarding thing being in this space is that working with students and a student first mentality is incredibly rewarding. I can't tell you the amount of times that like we go winless. Um, we typically don't, but like fine if as long as I see player growth. Um, like you worked with a lot of players, I've worked with a lot of programs. Um, and the only time that I really get upset with results is when I feel like we lost, they didn't win.
Hmm.
When I feel like you've shown me that you're better than what you're putting out, and that there can be a myriad of reasons, right? Um, but that's really the only time that we programs that I work with ever really crack down on players,
Right.
where it's guys like gave it your best, you left it all on the field, great work. And I think the more, again, if people are trying to get into the industry, know that you're probably not going to win every game. Know that you're probably going to be putting in 60, 80 hours if you're a single, solo office director, but you're really doing it for the students. You're not doing
Right.
it to get a plaque on your wall. You're not doing it to get a bunch of accolades. You're not doing it to sit on a bunch of committees. You're doing it so that you can better the experience of collegiate students, whether it's yours, whether it's at another institution. Um, and there are going to be a myriad of schools and types and needs that other schools have that maybe you don't, but you have to still, your best to serve the community, to serve the interest, even if they're not in your best interest.
Yeah, for sure. And like even if they didn't want to go pro, but just kind of like helping the students, like would be like best route, or like kind of research what someone need if they wanted to be a board of directors or a competition counselor. Like
Go ahead. Sorry.
if they have like they're like think that this is cool, I want to do something like this. Like what would the start button be for that?
I'm gonna dig myself into a hole, but like as an open invitation. Like I was happy to sit down. I'm plenty of students that I've talked to that I've worked with that want to be directors
Mhm.
after they graduate because they've had a similarly good experience like I did, where it's like this is something that I love. This is something that gets me excited to get out of bed in the morning. Want to do this. And a lot of the time, and I'll just be transparent, like a lot of the time when I have conversations with those students, I'm like, great that you love gaming. That's not like a job necessarily, like hobby.
Yeah,
So we have to identify like about esports is the thing that you like.
right.
So like it'd be player advocacy, in which case like direct makes sense, or like right, like it doesn't have
Mm.
to necessarily end in esports, but if you want to make it work, then you can. But just figuring out like core of what you love outside of I like playing games because everyone likes playing games.
Right.
But like, do we take this hobby and make it into a career? Kind of nucleus of like what is the thing that you love about esports? Is it like management? Is it seeing people improve week over week, nailing a concept that you've been drilling for like a month? Like, you might be a coach, you might be an event manager, you might love to book enterprise vans,
Right.
and like you love to like have very type A schedule. Like, you might be a great esports manager, right? There's a bunch of doors that can be opened. Um, it's just figuring out what not only I love gaming, I love developing a potentially industry,
Mhm.
but how do we interface that with maybe a core competency that you really feel passionately about?
Yeah, and especially like you're going from high school and then going to college, and that's the very first question people ask. What do you want to be when you grow up? And you're like 19 years old and you're like, I just want to play video games. It's like 12 other doors that involves video games. What part of that do you want? And what the feel that's missing in at least the collegiate space is that we don't know what those doors are. Most people, if they're like, I want to play video games and I'm gonna be the next ninja, it's like more like you like video games, but you know, like coaching more, or you want to be the physical therapist for a professional player. Like an option for you too. You don't have to just say, I don't like playing video games, because then towards the end, you're getting ready for the next LAN or first competition you're in, and you're looking at this and going, I don't really want to play this game. That's the hardest part.
I mean, come and go, and that's the unfortunate reality of the industry, right? I mean, I was a League of Legends player. I mean, game's still going, but it's been I think I've played for 12 years. And I mean, golden era, if that ever existed, is kind of right.
It is.
But I'm still able to be in esports. I'm still able to do my job, regardless of if my game comes or goes, because we're looking at core skill sets that are transferable across different professions.
Yeah.
On a much more lighthearted note, like scares parents a lot less when I can say, not gonna just game, they're gonna do
Right.
esports management, or they're gonna like you just chop off the esports or like management. Yes, I get that. I
Yes.
would go to college for that. Like if you do like business or like business development, if you just cut off the esports part, like you'll have like a pretty well known, well developed, well established
Right.
career path, that's a lot less scary to students as well as parents when they're looking at job markets or job prospects post grad.
Yeah.
It just you have a specialization and an understanding of something that you already engage with. Um,
Yeah, it's
so
like going back to the parents. Like when I was first trying, I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna go into esports marketing," and my mom's like, "Please don't do that. Just go into actual normal marketing." And I was like, "Okay, mom, sure." And I tried esports marketing, and I was like, "This is the same exact stuff I'm doing." Like to, and now she understands. So I'll tell her, I'm like, "Yeah, I was cool for marketing," and she goes, "Why does it say esports?" I was like, "Put that there. It's fake."
exactly. You're just describing a certain practice area the same way that you would like medical supplies marketing or traditional
Right.
athletics marketing or whatever. You can put whatever funny title you want in front of it, but like you're dealing with a core competency that's well understood, that's well developed, well established.
Right. And then, okay, I only have one more question left that I've asked the last few people. What would you tell your younger self before getting into this? Like, what would be the advice you would give Hubert before all this?
I feel like young me knew that it was a lot of hours.
Yeah.
I guess you're not gonna have your stereotypical 20s. I think would probably be my go-to advice for him. It's probably gonna be a lot more, office hours, a lot more developing like sets. Um, oh, you definitely don't know as much as you thought you did from a player perspective. That was a little bit of shock and awe when I got into my first director position.
Yeah.
Um, I thought that I had understood a lot of things. Turns out being an assistant director and a director, when your director is really good, they do a lot of work that you don't have to deal with. And so, meeting with different departments, figuring out different vendors, a lot of those relationship building pieces, whether external or internal. If you have a good director, you don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
Don't pretend like you do early career Hubert. That's a bad idea. Um,
Right. Don't fake it till you make it.
Exactly. But like all fairness, I think it's really difficult. As long as you're kind of again like serving students, making sure that you're being responsible to your stakeholders, whether that's your university or your students. I think it's really hard to mess up too bad as long as your priorities are kind of the right spot.
For
Um,
sure.
if you're as long as you're using kind of as your two guiding stars, guiding principles, it's really hard to mess up.
Yeah.
Like you make a lot of mistakes, and I think a lot of mistakes are going to happen because we're still super new as an industry. I know I still probably make mistakes now that I'll look back in 5 years and be like, what the hell was I thinking?
Right.
Um, but as long as you're doing it in the best interest of who your stakeholders are and making sure that your stakeholders are people that you do want to serve, right? Then I think it's really difficult to make irreparable mistakes in the space.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Hubert. It was a pleasure talking with you today. I've learned so much about being a board of directors. Who knows? I might be in the chair with you one day. If there's anything, if you want to leave any of your socials, please do.
For sure. If you guys want to follow Simpson Esports on basically everything, I think Twitter, Twitch, I think we still use Instagram and Facebook. My assistant director does all of our social media, so I apologize in advance to Seth. Otherwise, you can follow me directly, Santa Gragas, on basically everything Twitter, Discord. If any of you guys end up watching this that want to do esports directing or want to get involved in esports, if there's a high school director out there that thinks no one cares, my door's always open. So,
Yes.
always happy to meet with anyone. Always happy to give whatever resources I can. So,
That's awesome. And all the social links and rest of the description will be down below. So, yeah, thank you guys so much for watching or listening if you are. And we'll see you next week. Bye, guys.